Welcome to Recap King. In this video, we will explain The Great Gatsby. This movie tells the story of a writer and Wall Street trader who finds himself drawn to the past and the lifestyle of his millionaire neighbor. He was lured into the lavish world of his neighbor. However, he saw through the cracks of his neighbor nouveau rich existence, where obsession, madness, and tragedy await. What kind of story will be presented this time? Let's find out in The Great Gatsby. The Great Gatsby begins in 1929, where a World War I veteran named Nick Carraway, currently undergoing treatment in a mental hospital. He tells his doctor about Jay Gatsby, the most hopeful man he has ever met. The doctor then advised Nick to take advantage of his desire and write down his thoughts about the man's figure. Following the doctor's advice, Nick began to write about his experiences and thoughts on the figure of a man who so inspired him. At that time, 7 years earlier, in the summer of 1922, Nick had moved from the Midwest to New York after graduating from college and tried his luck working as a stockbroker. Nick then rents a groundskeeper's cottage in the North Shore village of West Egg, right next to the stately home of a man named Jay Gatsby, a mysterious business magnate who often hosts extravagant parties every weekend. To attend the party, no invitation is required because Gatsby opened his house and allowed anyone to come in and party to their heart's content. The scene then switches and shows a dominant rich man named Tom Buchanan, married to a beautiful woman named Daisy, who is none other than Nick's cousin. Nick then has dinner with Daisy and her husband, where Daisy plays the matchmaker between Nick and a woman named Jordan Baker, a famous golfer who is also Daisy's best friend, but they both seem awkward with each other. When Nick returns home, he sees Gatsby standing by the harbor, reaching toward a green light from the Buchanan dock. One day, Tom takes Nick out to lunch outside, where Tom invites Nick to stop briefly at a repair shop located in the Valley of Ashes to see the progress of his car being repaired by George Wilson, the workshop owner. However, it didn't take long for Nick to realize that Tom was having an affair with George's wife, Myrtle, judging by the man's demeanor, especially after Jordan told Nick that Tom had a mistress who lived in the Valley of Ashes. However, he chooses not to interfere in his cousin's household affairs and acts as if he doesn't know about Tom's infidelity, even when Tom openly takes Nick and Myrtle to an entertainment venue, where he asks Nick to have some fun while he was going to hang out with Myrtle. The next day, to his surprise, Nick accepts an invitation to attend Gatsby's party. The weekend arrived. After setting foot in Gatsby's magnificent house, Nick just found out that he was the only person who had ever received an invitation to a party from Gatsby and no guests had ever met Gatsby. Nick was so mesmerized by the splendor and luxury of the party, which of course cost quite a fantastic amount, and when Jay Gatsby often held parties like this every weekend, Nick could not imagine how much wealth this mysterious man had. But what makes Nick even more wondering is why Gatsby always has this festive party every weekend. What was the man's real aim? Is it just for fun and squandering his inexhaustible wealth? Then, Nick met with Jordan and had a little chat with the woman. Nick then accidentally passed a handsome blonde-haired man, and with a charming smile, the man introduced himself as Gatsby. At his first meeting with Jay Gatsby, Nick was so taken aback by the handsome face and charismatic aura of Jay Gatsby, who turned out to be a very friendly and pleasant man when they engaged in casual conversation. After the party was over, Gatsby then drove Nick to his house and said goodbye in a friendly manner while showing his charming smile. Nick also wondered about Gatsby being so friendly to him. Was Gatsby that way to everyone, or is it just him because they are neighbors? The next day, Nick is surprised by the appearance of Gatsby driving his luxury car into Nick's yard. Gatsby then takes Nick to Manhattan for lunch. On the way, they were chased by the police and reprimanded because Gatsby was driving his car at high speed. But when Gatsby showed him his card, the policeman apologized and stopped pursuing them. Gatsby then tells Nick that he is an Oxford graduate and war hero from a wealthy Midwestern family. Gatsby and Nick then head to a barber shop, where it's just a camouflage of the speakeasy bar run by Gatsby and his business partners. Gatsby then introduces Nick to his business partner, Mayor Wolfsheim, and invites Nick into his illegal bar. The visitors there seemed to know Gatsby and greeted him in a friendly manner, which indicated that Gatsby was quite an important and influential person there. Not long after, Tom appears at the bar and Nick intends to introduce Tom to Gatsby. But before Nick had time to introduce them, Gatsby had already left, and from the man's demeanor, it was clear that Gatsby felt uncomfortable and didn't like Tom Buchanan's presence around him. Nick, curious about Tom and Gatsby's relationship, he then asked Jordan, who apparently knows Jay Gatsby quite well. Jordan then tells Nick that U.S. Army Captain Gatsby started a relationship with Daisy in 1917. But then, Gatsby was sent to war and never returned, until Daisy finally decided to accept the proposal of the rich Tom Buchanan. However, just before her wedding, Daisy received a letter from Gatsby informing her of his return. Daisy had wanted to cancel her marriage to Tom, but her family forbade it and managed to convince Daisy to marry Tom. Jordan said that until now, Gatsby still loves Daisy, and the man deliberately throws a big party every weekend in the hope that Daisy can come to his party. Nick then takes the initiative to make Gatsby meet with Daisy, where Nick intends to invite Daisy to drink tea at his house. Gatsby looked surprised after hearing this and felt a little embarrassed because he didn't want to bother Nick. Gatsby even offered Nick a job with a salary that was much more than his current wage for the little care Nick gave him. But Nick refuses and convinces Gatsby that he only wants to sincerely help Gatsby so that he can reunite with the woman he loves so much. The next morning, Nick is surprised by the presence of several people in his yard, all of whom are workers who were ordered by Gatsby to turn Nick's small and simple house into a more beautiful and luxurious look, so that his meeting with Daisy will be more memorable. After a long wait, Daisy finally came when it started raining. However, the nervous Gatsby came out through the back door and came back into the house soaking wet. The two then behaved awkwardly with each other, because they had not seen each other for a long time. Moreover, Gatsby several times appeared clumsy and awkward in front of his ex-lover. But the nervousness and awkwardness did not last long. Gatsby and Daisy began to feel comfortable with each other and behaved like lovers who had not seen each other for a long time and wanted to let go. After an awkward reunion, Gatsby then invites Daisy and Nick to his house, showing how grand the house is, as well as the luxury goods and expensive clothes that the man owns. Gatsby then tells Nick that he intends to make Daisy his own, and asks her to divorce Tom Buchanan so they can get married. Since their meeting at Nick's house, Gatsby and Daisy started their affair and it continues from time to time. But Gatsby is dismayed when Daisy wants to run away with him, preferring that she get a proper divorce. Blinded by love and forbidden passion, Gatsby then asks Nick and Jordan to accompany him to Buchanan's house, where he and Daisy plan to tell Tom that Daisy will divorce him and marry Gatsby. While they are all having lunch at his house, Tom becomes suspicious of Gatsby and Daisy, but Daisy prevents Gatsby from revealing anything to Tom and suggests that they all go to the Plaza Hotel. Tom drives Nick and Jordan in Gatsby's car, while Gatsby drives Daisy in Tom's car. Tom then stops for gas at George's garage, where George tells the man that he and Myrtle will be moving out soon because he suspects Myrtle is having an affair with another man. At the Plaza Hotel, Gatsby then tells Tom about his affair with Daisy. Confidently, Gatsby told Tom that Daisy had never loved Tom and had only loved him all along. But instead, Daisy said that she loved Gatsby but couldn't bring herself to say she never loved Tom, because she had loved Tom when Gatsby wasn't by her side either. An annoyed Tom then accuses Gatsby of never attending Oxford and making his fortune through bootlegging with the mafia, as well as running an illegal bar business. Tom even insulted Gatsby by saying that Gatsby was just a poor man who pretended to be rich and respectable to impress Daisy, when in fact Gatsby was a nobody. Gatsby, who did not always stay silent when others insulted him, then became angry and attacked Tom, which did not describe the figure of a gentleman in the eyes of people like Tom. Finally, Gatsby and Daisy left the place, driving at high speed. On the other hand, George and Myrtle seem to have a big fight because of Myrtle's affair, where George forces his wife to reveal who the man that has dared to have an illicit relationship with her. Reluctant to tell her husband the man's identity, Myrtle then ran into the street and was accidentally hit by Gatsby's car traveling at high speed, thinking it was Tom's car. After learning about Myrtle's death, which shocked him greatly, Tom went to George and told him that the car that had hit his wife belonged to Jay Gatsby. Hearing this, George then assumed that Gatsby was Myrtle's mistress and deliberately killed her to cover up their affair. On the other hand, Nick concludes that Daisy was the one driving when the accident happened, because Nick accidentally found out that Tom promised Daisy that he would take care of everything, whatever it was, but Nick didn't tell Gatsby. Gatsby later admitted to Nick that he was born into a poor family, and his real name was James Gatz. Gatsby recounts that when he was 16 years old, he met a rich man and saved his life when they were hit by a storm at sea. The man then returned Gatsby's kindness by teaching him all the ways to be a man respected by many, from how to behave, talk, and so on, and thanks to that, Gatsby amassed his wealth. Gatsby then continued his story when he was about to be assigned to the battlefield, where Gatsby had asked Daisy to wait for him until he had made something of himself after the war. But instead, Daisy chose to marry Tom Buchanan, America's wealthiest bachelor, just 7 months after the war ended. He did attend Oxford, albeit for a brief 5 months on a special program for officers after the armistice. When Nick is about to go home, Nick then tells Gatsby that he's better than a lot of them, including Tom and Daisy. The next day, Gatsby, who was at his pool, heard the phone ring and thought it was Daisy. When a servant answers the phone, George, thinking that Gatsby is Myrtle's mistress and deliberately killing his wife, he then breaks into Gatsby's house, shoots and kills Gatsby, before deciding to commit suicide. Nick was the one on the phone when he heard the gunshots. After Gatsby's death, Nick was the only person other than a reporter to attend Gatsby's funeral. when Daisy, Tom, and their little daughter had left New York. The police and mass media falsely and negatively portrayed Gatsby as Myrtle's mistress and murderer, which is completely untrue and immediately makes Nick very angry. From the top of the stairs at the Gatsby house, Nick yells at the reporters and throws them all out of the house. Nick, who is very fed up with the city and its greedy residents, finally decides to leave the city after making a final trip through the empty Gatsby house and contemplating the ability of a J. Gatsby to continue to hope in his love, which ultimately leads the man to his final resting place. At the sanatorium, Nick finally finished typing his memoir, entitled The Great Gatsby. The film ends. Through this film, we are shown the figure of J. Gatsby, a mysterious rich man who turns out to have a dark past. But he still struggled to rise from adversity and managed to become a respected billionaire, despite all that he did to prove his love for Daisy. But Gatsby was so blinded by his love for Daisy, even though she had openly said that she did love her husband, even though she couldn't forget her love for Gatsby. Therefore, never love someone or hate someone excessively, because basically, something excessive is not good and may even plunge us into misery.